Okay guys, today we'll be reacting to whatever I'm typing in. I'm gonna stop using controller on this. Where's H? Okay, today we're going to be reacting to his story.
My wife walked into our kitchen and found me leading 4 grown men in worship around her air fryer. I'd been the family cook for 15 years. My oven was sacred, so when she brought home that 6-quart air fryer last Monday, I called it a glorified hairdryer and told her I'd never touch it. Friday night, she went to her sister's. I had frozen wings, an empty stomach, and an oven that took 35 minutes to preheat. I caved. 8 minutes later, I was holding a perfectly crispy wing like I'd just discovered fire. I ate the whole bag. Saturday, I met my drinking buddies at Murphy's and slid a container of leftover wings across the table. Greg laughed. "You dragged us out for cold wings? Those wings took 8 minutes." Mike scoffed. "In what? The microwave? Air fryer." Pete shook his head. "Bro, no. Come to my house tonight." Greg gave me a slow blink. "If you're trying to sell me something, I'm walking right back out." That night, I dimmed the kitchen lights and set the air fryer in the middle of the counter with 3 trays of raw wings beside it. The buddies walked in laughing. 8 minutes later, they weren't. Greg whispered, "Oh my God." Pete sat down on the kitchen floor. Mike pulled out his phone and started filming. That's when she came home. She stood in the doorway with her purse still on her shoulder.
Okay, so this seems like Zach D films, like a little bit different, to be honest. I don't know what I was expecting.
And stared at 4 grown men hovering around her air fryer like it was holy. I held out a wing. She walked over, took it, and bit down. Her eyes closed. I nodded. "I know." Greg whispered, "Praise be." She turned to me. "I told you." I raised both hands in the air. "You told me." My wife walked into our kitchen and found I just completed a number 2 on my crush's toilet, and while keeping my eyes glued to my Roblox match, I flushed and went to stand up.
I play that game on Roblox. It's like where you paint keys. It's kind of fun.
To haul myself up, but my legs folded and I hit the tile. Cold water soaked through my socks. I turned and the bowl was overflowing, water creeping across the floor toward me. My body started pumping with adrenaline because if I couldn't think of a solution, then my chances with my crush would be cooked. I was on the floor, trying to move my legs like a bicycle to get the blood flowing, when I heard a loud knock on the door from my crush's dad. "You good in there, son?" I scratched my head. Yep, all good. Just need a minute." I threw toilet paper at the water to soak it up, but it turned to mush in my hands. So I ripped my shirt over my head and shoved it across the floor like a mop. The bowl gurgled and burped up brown water all over it, and the smell was so rancid that my eyes instantly started watering. I buried my head in my hands because I was sure I was screwed. The handle started to turn, and my crush's dad announced he was coming in. I lunged for the lock, but my legs still wouldn't hold me up. The door swung open. He stood there staring down at me on the floor, shirtless, sitting in it. He pinched the bridge of his nose, but didn't say a word. He rolled up his sleeves, grabbed the plunger off the wall, and got down beside me to fix the toilet. When it finally drained, he pulled a towel off the rack and handed it to me. "You're the first kid my daughter has brought home that I've actually liked, so she doesn't need to know about this." My mouth dropped because I couldn't believe my crush's dad was the chillest guy ever. But when I put my fist out for him to bump it, he nodded at the phone still glowing on the floor. "Just cut down on the Roblox, huh? I just completed a number 2 on my crush's toilet, and while keeping the day before my birthday, my dad knocked on my door and asked me what I wanted as my present. I thought about
I like
how
the
I'd been
editing.
dreaming of a PS5 for years. And
I can never be like this.
Dad narrowed his eyes and nodded slowly. Then
I never
slammed my
make
door
videos
and
like
went
that.
back to playing with my brother. I couldn't sleep that night as I was so excited. But when I tore open my birthday present, my smile dropped. It was a soccer ball instead of a PS5. I asked Dad, "Why isn't it a PlayStation?" But he adjusted his glasses and crossed his arms. "Because I know what's better for you. A stupid console isn't a good present." I looked at the soccer ball and felt like crying because soccer wasn't even my favorite sport. I walked back to my room, and that's when my brother came in. He stared at my PS5 poster and my list of games I'd already planned to buy, then sat next to me. That's not fair what he did. I didn't respond, but then he said, "Let me handle it, little brother. I got you." He walked away, and I had no idea what he meant. Months passed, and I still didn't have a PS5, and Dad kept asking why I wasn't playing with my soccer ball. But then Christmas came. I unwrapped my present expecting nothing, and was still disappointed when I saw the soccer cleats. Dad grinned. "Now you have no excuse not to play with that soccer ball." I was crushed and started to leave, but then my brother tapped my shoulder and grinned like he had a plan. He tore open his present while Dad filmed, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. A PS5 stared him in the face. His eyes glowed, and he turned to Dad. "This is exactly what I asked for." Dad wiped a tear and replied, "Anything for my boy." He stopped recording, and I felt my chest aching because how could they do this to me? "But why didn't you get me one?" I asked, almost crying. Dad stared right at me. "You don't need one." I was about to crash out, but then my brother reached out and handed me the PS5. My eyes widened, and Dad immediately shot up. "What are you doing, son? That present is yours." He tried to grab the PS5 from me, but my brother slapped his hand away. "No, it's his. He asked for it, and you got him something he doesn't even like. Then I asked, and you got it immediately. I'm sick of being your favorite child." He didn't even wait for a response and turned to me. "Now let's go set it up." He held up a game from my list he'd seen months ago. We walked to my room, my hands shaking on the PS5 ball. The day before my birthday, my dad knocked. My best friend walked into class, painted in green from head to toe, wearing purple shorts, flexing both.
If I saw that, I'm just gonna smack him right away, to be honest.
Arms at the ceiling. I was the first to laugh, and he turned and slammed both fists down on the desk. "Hulk doesn't want to be laughed at. Hulk is angry." The whole class flinched, and I just rolled my eyes because I thought it was some weird prank. But when he came in the next morning, he punched the door frame and screamed, "Hulk has arrived." The entire class started whispering, until he sat down and flung a chair at the wall. I grabbed his shoulders. "Todd, what the hell are you doing? You look insane." He shook me off. "Todd gets picked on. Todd gets shoved into lockers. Hulk doesn't. It's better this way. You'll see." And at lunchtime in the cafeteria, I started to see what he was talking about, because the kid who shoved him every day knocked his tray onto the floor. But this time, Todd spun around and was ready to fight back. He roared into his face and drove his fist through the plastic tray on the table. "Hulk dares you to hurt him again. Do it!" The bully completely froze, and it was the first time I'd ever seen someone be intimidated by Todd. The next day, I found him alone at the lockers, still green, still in purple. "Todd, it's me. You can stop
That's
now."
so
He turned his
stupid.
head toward me, and there was nothing behind his eyes. "Todd is not here. Hulk is here to stay." Down the hall, a crowd swarmed him, pointing and laughing, but he was too numb to care anymore. My heart broke because I was the first to laugh at Todd, and now I was the only one who could. My best friend walked into class painted in green from head to toe, wearing I was 3 weeks into my sentence at a Mexican prison when the biggest guy walked up to me with his fists clenched. He pressed a wrapped knife into my chest and said, "I'm Diego, and you'll be hiding this under your bed for tonight's shakedown." I told him no, but he stepped so close I noticed the cartel ink around his neck. "Hide it, or I'm using it on you." I took the wrapped knife with shaking hands and walked back to my bunk, having no idea what to do. But
There's a
then I
knife
saw
in a
Diego
prison.
whispering to one of the guards and realized he had serious influence here. That night, the same guard walked in and immediately reached under my mattress. He pulled the knife out and instantly slammed me into the brick
I'm
wall
not
so
taking
hard I felt my tooth crack. "What's this American?" He held my arms behind my back. I didn't want to snitch, but I owed Diego nothing. So I replied, "Diego made me hide it. He said he'd kill me if I didn't." But the guard clicked handcuffs on me. I have no idea who that is. Just wait till morning. We'll sort this out. He threw me to the ground, and I spent the rest of the night locked in handcuffs. In the morning, the same guard opened my cell. "Come with me, American." He dragged me to the yard where Diego was already kneeling. He forced me down beside him and said, "There's only one way to settle this." He swung a leather strap hard at my back, and it tore through my shirt. He swung 10 times until my back was raw and red. It hurt to move. Then he got to Diego and gently slapped him 3 times. I was in disbelief, and Diego quickly rose to his feet. "We're fighting to the death," he announced to the crowd that was forming around us. I got up, my back in agony, and I didn't even have time to gather myself before he threw a punch. He hit me, and I stumbled, and he threw another, but I managed to duck, and his momentum carried him into the crowd. But that's when I noticed the same guard, slipping the same knife into Diego's hand. My legs trembled as I realized I was fighting a knife, and suddenly adrenaline took over, and my back was no longer in pain. Diego swung the knife, but I dodged it. He swung again, and as his cartel buddies yelled, and when it sliced my cheek, I knew I couldn't duck forever. So the next time he swung and missed, I unloaded a right hand. It cracked his jaw, and Diego fell face first, his head bouncing off the dirt. His knife fell from his fingers, and he stopped moving. The crowd went silent as I stood there with blood pouring down my cheek, staring at the guard who gave the knife. He was next. I was 3 weeks into my sentence at a Mexican prison when the biggest I held out my arm to shake my
What
girlfriend's
is,
mom's
I'm not
hand
even
for the first
gonna ask,
time,
because
and
if
she
I
looked
ask,
my
it'll be
tattoos
racist.
up and down and gasped. You look like criminal, like the scary men in our neighborhood. My
Okay,
girlfriend
that's
Ike
racist.
frowned. Mostok, he's an ex-MMA fighter. I politely nodded because I was determined to make a good impression no matter what. Her dad finished locking up the front door with a deadbolt and then stepped in front of me like I was a wild animal. He pointed a finger at my girlfriend. Me like last boy better. Aki crossed her arms in frustration. Let's just sit down and eat. I took the last seat at the table, and that's when I heard gunshots outside. Aki put her hand on mine and whispered, "Don't worry, it's just a sketchy neighborhood. We hear it all the time." He waved a hand at me. "My Ike go to college. You end up in jail or dead. You take her down with you." I opened my mouth to tell him about how I had $1 million in savings from MMA fighting, but stopped when we heard the gun outside again. Suddenly, a bullet shot through the glass. Ike and her family immediately ducked under the table, and her mom was crying. Why is this happening? I clenched my fists and walked right up to the window. I got it. A man got ready to rush in, but I was already moving. I caught his wrist and slammed the gun loose against the frame. He tried to swing at my cheekbone with his other hand, but I dodged it, took him to the floor, and choked him out the way 10 years of fighting taught me. Her mom crawled out from under the table, took the hand she wouldn't shake, and held it in both of hers. "You protect our family from scary men. You good husband." Her dad nodded politely, still shaking with fear. "Thank you." I held out my arm to shake my girlfriend's mom's. I handed my son a ball of garbage on his 9th birthday.
Even
I
like
couldn't afford
two
a football,
more,
but I spent
three
all
more.
night making this for you. He started dribbling it around our poor African village. "I love it, Baba. One day I'll be a famous footballer in the World Cup, and I'm going to be so rich I'll buy you whatever you want." I didn't know what to say because I didn't think that would ever come true. But a week later, a volunteer from a charity truck dropped off food and clothes, and he stopped to watch my son juggle that garbage ball 50 times without a drop. "Where did he learn that?" he asked. I told him he taught himself, and he laughed and yelled, "If he keeps that up, I'll see him at the World Cup." My boy's whole face lit up with a smile. "It's meant to be, Baba. I'm meant to be a football star." The volunteer climbed into the supply truck and came back out with real football shoes and a real football. For the next 2 years, he'd kick the football while every kid in the neighborhood watched and cheered. But everything changed when a football academy was running trials in the city. I sold our goat for 2 bus tickets there. My son lined up beside boys in clean kits, the garbage ball still in his bag, and I was sure they'd send him home, but they kept him. And for 5 years, all I heard from him were postcards, until one night my phone lit up in the dark and he could barely speak. "Baba, I made the national team, and we're going to the World Cup." And 3 weeks later, I sat in a stadium of 80,000 strangers with the cracked badge of our village on my chest. The teams walked out under the lights, and I found my son in the line, the flag on his chest. Before the whistle, he jogged to the sideline and pulled a ball of garbage out of his kit bag. He dropped it onto his foot and juggled it, once, twice, in front of the whole world. The boy who promised to buy me whatever I wanted pressed that ball of garbage to his chest, pointed it up at me, and I came apart in a stadium full of strangers. I handed my son a ball of garbage on his 9th birthday. When I visited my dad in the hospital, I found him sprinting laps around his bed, arms in the air. I started laughing. "Dad, what's going on? The last time I visited you, you could barely move." He spun around with a grin and pointed 2 finger guns at me. "Don't look so worried, kid. Your old man finally found something to live for, and now I feel better." I shook my head because a man with stage 4 liver cancer doesn't just feel better overnight. What was going on? 2 days later, I found him hanging off the patient lift bar, doing pull-ups, his IV line taped up to the ceiling. My jaw dropped to the floor. A man that sick shouldn't have had the strength. The man that he shared the room with started laughing. He looked even sicker than my dad, but my dad dropped down, took his hand, and the 2 of them waltzed between the beds, spinning each other under the lights. I looked at their IV drips to see if the nurses were adding anything to make them act this way, but it was all clear. The old guy grinned at me over my dad's shoulder. "He leads better than my wife ever did." My dad spun him out. Easy, Walt. Watching them turn, I saw a corner of red poking out from under the man's mattress. So while they were still spinning, I sneaked over and pulled it out. A red rubber hot water bottle, warm in my hands. I unscrewed the cap, and as soon as I smelled it, I gagged. It was the strongest whiskey I'd ever seen. Those two idiots had been working together to sneak in alcohol into their hospital room. My dad stopped mid-step, but his friend kept swaying. My daughter tops it up. Doctor said no fluids after 8, but he never banned a nightcap. My dad watched my face and chuckled. Told you I found something to live for, son. So I took a swig myself, handed it back to his friend, and pulled my dad in for the next dance. He gasped, and I laughed. Don't look so worried, old man. When I visited my dad in the hospital, I found him sprinting. When the bell rang at the end of my first day working at the daycare, I felt incredibly proud of myself. But when the parents lined up to pick up their kids, one of the mothers saw me and immediately marched over. She loudly demanded to know why a grown man would want to work around children. The other parents turned, and I felt a hitch in my throat, but I stayed calm and told her the truth. My daughter passed away, ma'am. She would have been the same age as the kids in this class. Being around them helps me feel close to her. I expected her to understand, but her face didn't soften, and she jabbed her finger in my chest. Well, that's even weirder, using innocent children as grief support. My blood ran cold as everyone around me stared, and I tried not to let it affect me. But the next day, the same mom stormed in while I was mid-lesson. Her husband stood behind her in his cop uniform, and they marched to my desk. He demanded I step away so he could search my computer. He began flicking through it, and one of the kids asked me, "Why are they searching your computer?" The woman answered, "Because he might be a bad man." I felt my legs buckling, and when I looked over, the daycare owner was in the doorway. I stood frozen as the cop went through my entire laptop, scrolling pictures of my dead daughter, clearly looking for something incriminating. After finding nothing, he slammed my laptop shut so hard, I heard a crack. At the end of the day, the owner called me into her office. She said, "A parent is uncomfortable with you being here. I know you didn't do anything wrong, but cops getting involved is a terrible look for the daycare. I'm going to have to let you go." I was in disbelief and stood up with shaking legs. I packed my things and placed the framed photo of my daughter in the box, and as I walked through the lobby, I saw the same mom there. She was smirking with her arms crossed. When the bell rang at the end of my first day, I sat in the truck with my hand on the door, trying to figure out how to tell my dad I wanted to quit swimming. He turned the engine off and reached into the bag between us. "Eat up. We've got a few minutes," he said, and put a breakfast sandwich in my hand. "You know I went to state in the 100th fly at your age?" He nodded toward the building. 42 seconds. My name's still on the wall in there. He'd driven me to this pool at 5 every morning since I was 6, and he said the same thing every drive, that these mornings were the best part of his day. And here I was, about to take them away from him. The words were sitting right there in my throat, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I just held the sandwich, still wrapped, the way I'd held everyone for months, my hands smelling like chlorine I couldn't scrub off. "You're quiet," he said. "Nervous about regionals?" "Yeah," I said, and stared out the window. We walked in together, and he climbed up to his usual spot on the bleachers. Coach lined us up for the 100 fly, my dad's old race, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught him leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I pushed off the wall soft and barely kicked, and by the first turn, the kid in the next lane was already half a body ahead of me. "What are you doing out there? Move!" Coach yelled, but I didn't go any faster. When I came up for air, I caught my dad in the stands, and he wasn't watching the clock or the other swimmers. He was watching me, leaning forward, like he was starting to realize something was wrong. I hit the wall last, and instead of pushing off for the next lap, I just hung there on the lane rope and let the heat go without me. Coach blew his whistle, and up in the stands, my dad was already on his feet. Afterwards, we sat in the truck, and he didn't start the engine. He handed me my water and watched me not drink it. "Why do you look like that?" he asked. I set the bottle down in my lap. "I don't want to swim anymore, Dad. I haven't for a long time." He got quiet and stared out the windshield. "Is that what's been eating you?" I nodded, and the rest came out in a rush. "I didn't want to let you down. I know how much this means to you." He laughed, not in a mean way. "Buddy, I don't care about the swimming. I never did." He put the truck in reverse, then put it back in park. "You think I get up at 5 for the ribbons? I do it for the drives, the sandwiches, 20 quiet minutes with you before the world's even awake." He turned to me. "We can quit the team tomorrow and keep the mornings." I picked up my sandwich and finally unwrapped it, and I never swam another race after that morning, and damn, that sandwich was good. I sat in the truck with my hand on the door,
Alright, that's
trying
the
to
last
figure out
one.
how to tell